I'd like to now welcome to the stage Heather Nauert, but first allow me to introduce her briefly. She'll be moderating our first panel titled Artificial Intelligence Meets Real Diplomacy. Heather Nauert is a broadcast journalist and former acting Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs and spokesperson during the first Trump administration. She is a leading voice in American diplomacy and strategic communications. Please welcome Heather Nauert. I would also like to introduce our esteemed panelists, and I'll call them out by name and they'll come on stage. Ron Ash, CEO and Chairman of the Board, Accenture Federal Services. Joe Larson, Vice President of Government, OpenAI. Brandon Remington, Deputy Undersecretary of Policy, U.S. Department of Commerce, International Trade Administration. And James Roscoe, Chargé d'Affaires, British Embassy, Washington.
Thank you so much. And gentlemen, thank you for being here, and to all of you for being a part of the Trusted Tech Network. Keith was speaking a little bit earlier at lunch and said, we are here to create a trusted tech movement. And indeed, we are. So thank you. We are in a race to achieve global AI dominance. And the country or countries that do it the best, that do it the first, and create the largest ecosystem, will set the standards and reap the benefits both militarily and economically. We can be the gold standard, American companies and also America, by working together to do that. We have a few advantages. The United States happens to be the best in creating this technology. Congratulations to all of you, because a bunch of you are part of that. So not only are we the best, but we have companies that want to work together and an administration that wants to help promote our companies globally. So how do we do that? Some of the folks here are doing that just now, and we're about to learn more from them. How do we build an enduring global alliance? Brandon, you are at the Department of Commerce, and that is one of your mandates there at Commerce, where you're building a coalition of allied companies to promote American technology abroad. What can you tell us about the process?
Great. Well, thank you. So, as you all know, the president announced that it is the policy of the United States to promote the American tech stack abroad. You also know just how complex that is, right? It's the full stack. It's everything from power generation all the way up to apps, and it's around the entire world. So the complexities abound. We're in our listening period right now. You can go to aiexports.gov. You can go to the normal channels. We want to hear from you. And what we're doing right now is hearing from companies, from countries. What are your actual problems? What do you actually face? What do you want the government to do to help you? What do you want us to not do? We're mindful of the Hippocratic Oath here. There are a lot of ways to do this wrong. We want to get it right. We want it to be practical. We want to show ROI on both sides, for foreign buyers, governments, companies, and for American companies as well. So right now, what we would most appreciate, join the conversation. Let us know.
It's especially important to hear from American companies what's working, what's not, what are the barriers to success, and you will collect all that information and then do what with it? Create the policy.
Essentially. I mean, first we listen, hone in on what's practical. There's been lots of policy papers, etc. In this case, this is where the rubber meets the road. So this needs to be value to you, value to both sides of, why should anyone engage? Why should the buyers engage? Why should the sellers engage? So it will translate it. We'll read it all, send it in.
Good thing we have a lot of employees to do that. And this really is part of what Keith did when he was at the State Department, when we worked on 5G technology as part of the administration's policy and advancing that worldwide. One of the challenges at the time, if you recall, was we would say, do not buy Huawei. But often we didn't have a solution in our back pocket to offer our allies. And so they instead bought Huawei. And today we will be able to following your period of listening and further developing and honing the policy, be able to say, buy American tech?
Yes, I mean, I think the analogy you start with matters a lot. If this is 5G, if this is cloud, this is different. I mean, cloud relates, right? And then how do you get the incentives right? And we're integrating everything from export promotion, export control, standards, entire government stack here. There was discussion earlier about doing things new. You can draw lessons from the past, but what is the motion we should be doing now? What are the most useful parts? And how do we make that practical? That's what we're trying to translate.
Okay, great. Let's go to Joe. Joe's with OpenAI. Joe, thank you. And previously you served at the Department of Defense and also with Anduril. So a lot of great experience in this. What is standing in the way of AI development in the United States right now?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And thank you for the invitation to be here today. So I am with OpenAI. I lead what's called OpenAI for Government. It's the part of OpenAI that works with the government, whether it's state and local governments. We've got several partnerships with states across the country where we deployed our flagship product, ChatGPT, for those enterprises. We work with federal civilian agencies where we're deploying ChatGPT now across those agencies. We also work in the national security space, partnerships in defense and intelligence. And then I also lead our work internationally, where we're taking OpenAI, we call it OpenAI for countries, and we're deploying OpenAI to advance democratic principles globally and abroad. The way I think about artificial intelligence is this is a historic technology of historic magnitude. So some level of historic analogies matter here. One thing that I would observe over the history of civilizations is they thrive and they endure when their sources of economic and industrial power align to their sources of national security power, of intelligence power, of international power. What made the Romans so powerful was that they not only deployed armies, but they invented currency and trade, invested in infrastructure that allowed both their economies and their national security enterprise to flourish. In the 1500s, the Dutch and the English invested in shipping that was informed by naval investments, but also encouraged international commerce. We're all familiar, and I think the reference to Freedom Forge, American investments in manufacturing in World War II not only spawned tremendous economic advancements across the country, but led to a national security enterprise that was able to successfully save the Western world from the throes of oppression. Well, where are we at today? We're faced increasingly with a worldwide digital economy. The top market cap companies are digital companies. We've seen the growth of NVIDIA, for example, which is the most valuable hardware company to ever exist. AI companies in particular are growing tremendously. Massive amounts of venture capital being thrown into the space and private capital. So I would just say that it's imperative on the U.S. to align its approach to advancing those technologies. And what does that mean in practice? It means a number of things. I think the world is watching to see if the United States is a place where artificial intelligence can coexist with democratic governance, right? And that means really important but thought out thresholds for regulation, not jumping to overregulation as a first principle, but thinking through the right regulations that matter and thinking through where the government can begin to apply these technologies to advance democratic principles. And so, I think there's a lot to be done in that space.
Can we do this fast enough? I mean, a Trump administration moves very fast, but government tends to move slow. Can we do this fast enough to keep up with our adversaries, to beat our adversaries?
Sure. I've been a proponent of speed my whole career. I will point out that, the United States did basically invent artificial intelligence. I had the opportunity to, nearly 20 years ago to work at some of the foundational AI programs at places like DARPA before AI was cool. 10 years ago, Brandon and I worked in the Pentagon where we stood up Project Maven, which was the Department of Defense's largest investment in operational AI ever and endures today as sort of a pathfinder for AI deployment. So, I do think the traditional reticence to, I would say the attitude that the U.S. government is inherently slow isn't necessarily always true. There are times where the government can move fast. And I would encourage in this space, doing what you can to move with speed and scale to begin to deploy these technologies.
Let's ask Ron. Ron's with Accenture. So, Ron, you hear from clients all around the globe about this. There are some barriers in the way, such as energy, power here in the United States, a workforce that we're training, but we have a lot more to do. What are you hearing from customers about some of those barriers?
So first off, I think thank you for having me. It's great to be up here. What I'm hearing most is how can we go faster, but also how can I trust what I'm getting out of the AI, right? And so what we're trying to do is work with customers to understand and build trust in all layers of the technology, but also train people on how to use the technology to better themselves, right? What we've seen in our over 6,000 programs, both on the private side and also for the federal government, the challenge isn't the technology. The challenge isn't even the data anymore, right? We can get to the data. It's about the workforce embracing it, working with us collaboratively to improve it, and then deploy it, right? We're still, as a nation, and I think just in general for the federal government, in too many spots, still doing proof of concepts, right? And so what we try to do is work with customers to understand and set a bold vision, work quickly to get to proof of concept and then scale it. But it's super important that the organization is communicating what the bolder vision is and then how people fit into that vision, right? And when I think about training of the workforce, most people, including our own employees, are afraid of what AI is going to do to their jobs. And so we're trying to do everything we can to train our people that it's human plus machine. This isn't replacing you, it's augmenting you, because it is true. Our country has more problems than they do money, right? So we're not going to get rid of the workforce. What we're going to do is augment and move faster. And the other thing I would say is we as an industry have to collaborate better, right? Joe and I were just talking in the back about some ideas, but we have to be able to share lessons learned in our programs, even when they're with competitors, so the government benefits from that. It can't just be Accenture and OpenAI are learning over here and another company, and we have to work together, because that's not, our adversaries are working as one unit, as we talked about, and we can't work as hundreds of different units, right? And so trying to build collaboration like this today to really focus on how do we learn from each other, how do we all benefit from this, and really scale to keep up with our adversaries is the most important thing.
Those are such excellent points. And to put in a plug for something that the Kroc Institute is doing, something Michelle talked about earlier, a partnership with LinkedIn where training will be available on LinkedIn, correct, Michelle? So that employees around the world, whether they're at small firms or large firms, can learn more about AI adoption and how to use it and how to trust it. When I first started using it, frankly, I thought, is this cheating? And I think a lot of people, maybe of my generation, of our generation, probably felt that way. Like, am I taking a shortcut by utilizing this? But you're also right about it. It's saving a lot of time. James, one of our allies here from the UK, James, representing the British Embassy, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your many years of our allied partnership. The U.S. and the U.K. recently signed a prosperity deal, a tech prosperity deal. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I'd start by just saying the collaboration point is really key. And it's not just in industry, but it's between allies, because we are in a race and we do need to make sure that we do beat our adversary to the punch here and to the finish line. The tech partnership deal was essentially about looking at how we can bring the US tech industry and the UK tech industry together more closely to win that race. And I think there are different parts to this. The first part is about making sure that when it comes to people, capital, IP, they can move more freely between the US and the UK. And the UK is the only other Western country, the only other free country that has $1 trillion tech sector. So we've got some great partnership that we can have between the US and the UK. I think we also need to think about how we get out of your way, which is the point that Brandon was making. In terms of industry, we want to make sure that if we do have to regulate, we're regulating in a way that works for you, that we're regulating for opportunity. We're not regulating to try and manage all potential risks, because that just doesn't work. And I think some of the other Western economies are thinking about risk in that way, and we need to think about opportunity when it comes to AI. I think we also just need to make sure we don't end up with sort of patchwork of regulation and standards. So again, we need to be talking to industry. We need to understand from industry what you want and what you don't want in this space. One of the ways the UK is looking at this is we're designing a sandbox, essentially, in which AI, large language models, or AI companies can come with their tools, work in the sandbox, show us that it works, and then just carry on so that we're not getting in people's way, so that we are enhancing and we're accelerating these processes.
That's what corporations need governments to do, to not get in the way. So you've got that one exactly right. Do you envision expanding this to five countries, to other nations?
I think this is happening in two ways, right? I mean, the US has signed tech partnership deals now with, I think, the Japanese and with the South Koreans. So we were very happy to be the first one, but I think it is something that we can see and we can expand. I think it's also about industry, thinking about how we work together. So at the heart of the tech partnership is bringing together the UK and the US. So our research institutes are working together. But if you look at the tech stack that we're going to build, the AI stack we're going to build in the UK, that is going to be a UK company, N-Scale, working with NVIDIA, working with Microsoft, working with OpenAI. That same package is working with a Norwegian company to make sure as we build in Norway, we're building with a similar stack. When we build in Portugal, we're building with a similar stack. So how do we bring together these companies that are leaders in the UK, in the US, with our other allies, and make sure we're moving together so that as we move beyond just the tech stacks, as we think about the apps, as we think about the software that you put on top of that, people are instinctively turning to the Western model for that stack and not to the Chinese.
Okay, thank you so much. What incentives, and Joe, let me ask you about this, what incentives and mechanisms do we need to get more allied countries or more countries that are embracing of the West to adopt American AI?
Well, one thing I'll say on embracing AI is, I would say this to any government counterpart that is in this room: your staff is using AI, whether you want them to use AI or not. They're using AI. One of the challenges I think we face is governments want to proceed responsibly with the integration of this technology. They want to put guardrails on it. They want to test it. They want to authorize it. Meanwhile, many of the people within those institutions that are solving real problems operate outside those confines. That's a dangerous thing. I would not encourage you to, and I do not endorse the use of commercial large language models in unauthorized ways, but I'm also a realist, and I know that it happens, right? You walk outside the building, and I've seen this on, military bases, and people are on their phones asking questions to ChatGPT that they would ask on their work network if those capabilities were available. So I do think it's incumbent upon the government to be able to deploy these things at speed and at scale, right? Kind of the idea that we'll tentatively look at it, we'll study it for a number of years, we'll test it according to our own benchmarks and frameworks, and then maybe if we like it, we'll deploy it on the approved networks. Well, that works in a variety of circumstances with the technology that's got this rapid of a consumer adoption. ChatGPT is now the 5th most visited website of the world. There's, coming up on 1 billion active weekly users. It just doesn't work. So in terms of incentives, the incentives are already there. The workforce itself is embracing AI. It's getting the machine to move at the speed of the workforce and to take the necessary steps to understand, accredit, and deploy the technology that matters in ways that can be used across the institution.
Trust is a major factor in all of this. As you mentioned, men and women asking ChatGPT questions that should be saved for different kinds of secure servers. So how do we create something where there is trust on both ends?
Well, I bristle a little bit at the word trust. I'll quote my colleague, Jane Pinellas. Many of you may know Jane. She was the DoD's first chief officer for responsible AI, saying, the definition of trust, there's over 300 different definitions, and most of them are qualitative. So they preferred the term assured confidence, or justified confidence, or assured AI, which I think is a bit more about metrics. It's more about understanding what the technology actually does, its limitations, being able to develop a regime, to test it, to evaluate it, and then deploy it in a way that, partners both the limitations of the technology with the workflow it adopts. I've seen in the DoD, in particular, in the IC, there are circumstances where it's perfectly appropriate to deploy a model that may have a little bit lower standard. And there are certainly circumstances where you would never want to deploy deep learning at all because it simply can't achieve the necessary technical pre-qualifications. So it's really a partnership between the AI provider and the workflow to determine when it's appropriate to move forward. But I'm not sure you'll ever get to what I would call trust. It kind of anthropomorphizes a complicated set of variables between the AI and the problems the AI is addressing.
Then perhaps on the other hand, how do we create AI models that aren't too restrictive by the government? Governments have the ability to step in and really crack down on things. So how do we structure that?
I think, Ron could jump in on this. I think there's a lot of partnership here that has to happen between those organizations that have the data, right? They have the subject matter experts and understand the workflows. I think industry has to come together on this. I think government has to come together, and it has to operate at all levels. The user has a voice, the warfighter has a voice, the analyst has a voice in the way these things are deployed. Ron, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, when we're building models to enhance decision making for the warfighter, the strategy we use is building digital twins that we can simulate scenario after scenario, so the warfighters can be in the room, can see the decisions, how they're being made, why they're being made. We can modify those along the way. That is the big difference that we haven't been able to do in the past, is being able to create these simulations overnight that can help the warfighter have the confidence in making the decision or in the information that's being provided to them, right? So that's something that 5 years ago we would have never been able to do. Right?
Yeah,
even 2 years.
I'm very uncomfortable with the idea that you would take even GPT-5, which is the world's leading frontier model, and it's not a Swiss Army knife that can solve all problems, right? It only works with the data it's been trained on. It only operates in the environments it's intended to operate in, largely consumer and commercial. So the government needs to move faster, and it's really a partnership to be able to work to make models that are attuned to the data, the workflows. They speak the language of the user, rather than just thinking AI is some magic technology you can pull out of the box and have it deploy and work against any problem that your organization has.
That's right.
Really fascinating points. As we begin to wrap up here, Brandon, I want to ask, when you speak with foreign governments, what are some of the main selling points that you and your team at Commerce utilize when trying to sell them on the concept of Buy American?
Sure. I mean, I think right now we're asking them, what do you want? How can we help you? And it really is a values discussion. That just like the, earlier eras, they recognize that they can buy other stacks. They'll probably be cheaper. They'll be subsidized. If you're going for low cost only, there may be other options. But what they're interested in here are the values that these are built on and the values that are included. They want to understand what trust means, what sovereign means. They want to understand what is transparent and what metrics are there. And then they want to help navigating the thousands of companies and how do they start, some of those details. But in the end, it is Buy American is a strong brand. And Buy American is understood throughout the world. And they want to understand how they can buy American. And they're asking us, how do we do that? And we're trying to develop that answer now. So Secretary Letnick will weigh in. We'll hear more soon. And we want to hear from you. What's the best way to do that? You've been in there. You've been in those rooms. You've been in those conversations. It's something that's familiar to you.
All right. So you heard it, folks. So weigh in, Department of Commerce. You're going to have a lot of emails on your inbox. And look forward to hearing what comes out of that. James, why don't we just get final thoughts as we wrap up, James?
Yeah, I mean, I think my thought is the difference between Huawei and now is we have an opportunity to say to people, not just don't buy that, but buy this. And I think the way that you make that attractive to allies is say, how do we partner in building this together? So that, the US is inevitably going to lead the way on this. It's inevitably going to be the tech leader. But how can you find those unique points that other partners can bring to the game to make sure this is a Western victory and a collaborative effort?
Yeah, I'm in my spare time, I'm a reserve colonel in the Marine Corps and was recently part of an exercise where, I participated as part of NATO staff, right? And it was a little concerning to me to see a set of technologies that existed for partners and allies over here, and then a set of U.S. technologies over here. Clearly the future is a future of interoperability, right? So we need to work together, and I think this is a place where the United States is the world's leader in the deployment of AI in high consequence environments. I think that's an area where We've done a lot of work as a nation, and there's a lot of lessons learned we should be bringing internationally to help allies and partners not have to go through the pain of learning those same lessons. You can expedite that learning curve.
And Ron.
Yeah, and I'll just echo what Michelle said. We are in the first or second quarter of this fight, and the faster we come together, even though we can operate in a capitalistic world, we have to collaborate. And what this administration is doing, creating these opportunities for industry to work together to provide this technology to our allies and to ourselves, we have to all be behind that because otherwise we will lose.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. And thanks to all of you.